we started this panel with my friend David Kirkpatrick as a moderator, as an inspirator. David is a long-time friend of DLD. David is one of the secret weapons of DLD, the special ingredients. He is not only a friend, he is a tough, serious, very friendly, very freundlich, very zugeneigt, the advisor and consultant to DLD. He did his own conference at Fortune. He's a long-time journalist of the Silicon Valley things. Let me read, I'm not so good in the linear things, you know. He started as a local reporter and connoisseur of Silicon Valley. Lucas wrote me this. Senior editor of Fortune magazine for many years. And now he's a book author. He wrote about Facebook. When is it coming out? It will come out in June. But who of you have been last year at DLD? And then you know David. He did this fabulous panel with Mark Zuckerberg. It was great. It was one of the DLD moments. So, David, come up. What are you talking about? With whom are you talking about? What are you doing?
Well, first we're going to sort of continue the conversation I had with Mark last year with Mike Schroepfer, who's the head of engineering at Facebook. So, Mike, why don't you join us? And then after I spend some time talking to Mike, then we're going to be joined by 4 additional panelists and have a conversation about the world of data that we're now sort of swimming in and what it means, how we can take advantage of it, and it'll sort of expand well beyond Facebook. But we're going to start out talking mostly about Facebook and that stuff here, because Mike is really one of the very top people at Facebook, one of the people who spends time every day with Mark Zuckerberg. Really, along with Chris Cox, who's head of product, Mike is the head of engineering, is along with Mark really, that's the triumvirate really that is deciding where this system is headed. Anyway, it used to be his job was formerly held by Adam D'Angelo, who was really one of the co-founders of Facebook, and if you read my book, you'll find was really one of the guys who helped come up with the idea. He's just launched his own company called Quora. We were talking yesterday a little bit about the challenges of filling those shoes, but Facebook is a very kind of welcoming culture for people as smart as him, so he has had no trouble kind of filling it. Now, he was formerly the CTO at Mozilla before he came to Facebook, and he's also worked at Sun, and where else?
2 small startups. Started my own company called CenterRun and sold that to Sun in 2003.
Okay. But you were at Sun before that too, right?
No. That's how I got to Sun.
Oh, okay.
Got there via acquisition.
What was your first technology job?
It was this tiny little company called Puffin Designs that was doing special effects software for the movie industry.
Oh,
so
really?
got to work on Star Wars movies and some other things.
Oh, that's very cool. So anyway, so Mike, how should we be thinking of Facebook these days? I mean, you spend your time thinking of where it's going. Given where it's going, what is it?
Well, I think there's 2 aspects. So I start with kind of the mission and the goals of Facebook, and Mark is exceedingly clear about this if you ever spend time talking with him, which is really about giving people the power to share and connect, which, you know, is about allowing people, whether it be a family, a friend, a colleague you just met, or someone you met at the conference, giving you this electronic system that allows you to share photos, go to events, status updates, whatever it may be to help you connect with those people. So I think that's the mission of the company. And you can see that instantiated. I like to describe us as a 2-product company. There's Facebook.com, the website, which is the thing that I think most people in this room and in the audience are probably most familiar with. It's the website where you go and you log in and represent yourself online and share these things with your friends, families, and colleagues. Then there's the second part, which is Facebook, the platform, which is both the platform for applications within the website, and I think increasingly more important, what we call Facebook Connect, which is the ability to take this social graph, my friends, the ability to share and communicate, and my identity, and take it with me wherever I go, whether it be on the Xbox or an iPhone, or to a new startup, or to a big website somewhere else on the web.
Well, you know, it is, in fact, that second piece is clearly the part that most people don't sufficiently appreciate as Facebook's, in terms of the degree to which Facebook invests hopes and expectations into that part of its business.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit more about that. I mean, in my book, actually, which of course is not out, but I know what was in it. I've read it. I've got like a page and a half of executives at Facebook explaining all the different ways they talk about how Facebook is more than a website, right? There are people at Facebook, as you well know, and maybe you're one of them. In fact, I'd like you to say, are you one of them, who actually say Facebook could very well end up having no website experience whatsoever down the road. So what does that mean?
So there's a couple things here. So I'm an engineer, and so the first thing to realize is that platforms are amazing because they're extraordinarily high leverage ways to do things. When you build a platform, you're not dependent on just yourself to be the innovator. You can kind of tap into the ecosystem of anyone in the world who wants to do it. So to be very concrete, you think about all the things in the world that are better with my friends, and all the things on the web and in the real world with devices that are better with my friends, and all the different experiences, whether it be restaurant reviews, whether it be event creation, whether it be sports, whether it be games. You kind of have two options. You say, Facebook builds the best version of each of those, or we provide the kind of the glue. You can think of it as a web service for communication and identity, and let the entire world go out and innovate and build the best question and answer site, the best restaurant review site, maybe per country. Maybe there's a different one in each country of the world, and use this glue that allows me to go to this site and bring my social network with me, my friends, present my identity so I can log in as Mike Schroepfer with my profile picture, and then share that information back as I want to with my friends and network. So I think it starts from this belief that is one of the most leveraged ways to kind of change the world the way we want to see it.
So do you really believe it's possible that someday there might not be anything called Facebook.com?
I think it's certainly possible, yeah.
I mean, the way I talk about it is people say, what is Facebook going to be in 10 years? And I say, well, the way you guys think of yourselves is as an identity registry and also as a hub for communication. Because now you have an API for putting content into Facebook, which is Connect, and you have an API for taking content out of Facebook, which is now what you call the Stream API. And I guess you're going to put a much bigger version of that out after April, where they have another F8 coming. And the word on the street is that is going to be a major shift in that whole universe of Facebook, of taking things around the web using your Facebook capabilities. So it's true that, but this brings up a really key issue about Facebook, which is fascinating and certainly has been a vexing issue for a lot of the users of Facebook, which is that you guys change what you do so damn much that your members sometimes can't keep up with you, and you have these constant sort of revolts when you're doing things that seem to you to be just the next evolution of what you always wanted to do, and yet to them it seems like you're changing into something they don't like. How do you deal with that? And is that a problem, or is that just a necessary part of being Facebook?
Well, I think it's a challenge. I mean, I think anyone who's worked on a consumer product has seen that change is hard for everyone. You know, even when change is unambiguously positive, you know, and the data shows it, and you can show that this is a positive change. I think it takes a readjustment. But you know, and I'll credit Mark Zuckerberg with a lot of the feeling on this. There's the constant feeling that in order to be competitive in the market and achieve what we want to do, we have to be constantly innovating. And especially in consumer markets where patterns in the world change, opinions change, sentiments change, you want to make sure your products are tracking the market as closely and as quickly as possible. And the only way we know how to do that is to be out there and trying things. I can't tell you how many times we've had a discussion on a whiteboard and someone who's extraordinarily smart was convinced that they were right and they understood how people were going to use the product, and you stick it out there in the market and it was just dead wrong. And so I think you need to think about how quickly you can get your product out there, see what real people do with it, and then adjust based on that feedback. So every time we've released something, we've usually had something that was right about it and a general thought that was right, and then a bunch of new things we learned as real people started to use it. And then the thing that I don't think people realize is we look very carefully at the data of how people use our products. So yes, and we do listen when people complain, and it's, you know, we don't like to make people upset. But you listen to what they're saying, and then you watch what they're doing. And then you kind of put those two together, and you realize, all right, we need to tweak it in this direction. And if you look, you know, through the history of almost every redesign in the site, it started with frustration and confusion, and then resulted in, because of the change, and then resulted in usually a huge increase in usage and behavior and happiness. I mean, we've gone through a number of changes in the 18 months that I've been there, and we've seen the largest growth spurt Facebook's ever seen. You know, my second day of work, we had 100 million active users. We're now well over 350 million active users, and that's in 18 months.
Yeah, actually, I tell the story in the book about the newsfeed controversy, which is the biggest revolt from your users you ever experienced, when 10% of Facebook's users were protesting actively against Facebook using Facebook's tools. And what I write was that, you know, even though there was all this complaint and all these groups, Mark was looking at the data, and he saw that usage of the service had spiked dramatically as soon as the newsfeed was introduced.
Yeah.
Plus, everybody at Facebook thought the ironic fact that people were using what they learned in the newsfeed to join the groups to protest the newsfeed was an interesting fact.
Yep.
But that data, which is what we're here to talk about, was what ultimately determined the confidence that this was a good change, but it needed to be adjusted with additional privacy settings, et cetera. But then again, this thing of being alongside where social shifts are happening, I came up just the other day when Mark was getting that award at TechCrunch, and he made his comments about privacy and got a lot of pushback. He seemed to a lot of people to be saying, what Scott McNeely said a few years ago, privacy is dead, get over it, which isn't really what Mark said.
No.
He just said he thinks that people care less about privacy than they used to, but because of the changes you've recently made with the everyone privacy setting being sort of the seemingly encouraged selection when you redid your privacy thing the other day, and a lot of people seem not to have fully understood what they were doing when they accepted the everyone privacy setting. Some people see you as sort of pushing people to reveal more about themselves than they're comfortable doing. Does it worry you that you might be doing that?
So just to clarify one thing, Mark actually specifically said what he thought was that people were getting increasingly comfortable sharing information online. And I think that's actually a very fair statement. If you look at a lot of new services that are coming out, like let's take a location service out there. Many of the location services have default public privacy settings. So a very sensitive piece of information, which is what physical location am I at right now, is default public, right? Or sharing services or video services, which are default public. So I think it is fair to say that there is a lot more examples of people sharing information broadly that they didn't do 10 years ago or 5 years ago or even 3. So I think that's a fairly fair statement. I think the challenge, and this is really a product design question, is really Facebook wants to try and give people control over what they want to do. It varies from person to person, how comfortable you are sharing things. It even can vary from post to post. And I know for me personally, there are posts that I am totally happy the whole world, seeing. And there are posts that very specifically, maybe it's photos of my nieces and nephews or a wedding that really I only want, closer friends to see. And so I think what we're trying to do is figure out the right balance of what things do people want to see and what do they don't, and give them the tools that they can. Part of this rollout was the ability which was brand new, per post to decide where these posts go. And also I think that the other challenge with many of these things is, part of this was a very overt, we put a wizard in front of people to help explain to them what the settings were. Because I'm not sure that people actually fully understood what they were using before all of these things.
Do you think they do now?
I think they do a lot better.
You do?
Yes. Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't think they know any better now than they did before. In fact, you guys changed so much. Many users and observers feel like your users continue not to fully understand the consequences of their decisions about their own data, which is our ostensible topic here. So obviously, you have a lot of work to do, but not that you would ever deny that. But it seems like there's so much data about individuals on Facebook that the challenge of giving people the controls that you claim to be so committed to giving them is just a big challenge. Is that a right way to think of it?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a hard product design, and the one thing I'll highlight is, this does stem from the sense of control. Privacy controls or not, I know that I've made a post before that I was embarrassing because I misspelled something or just didn't intend to publish it. But you can delete it on Facebook, and then it's gone. It's off your profile.
Right, you can't do that on Twitter, I guess.
You can't, and think about control of what your choices are. Type your own name into Google, and then think about how much control you have over what comes back, which is, pretty close to zero, right? You're kind of at the mercy of both the web and Google to determine if someone meets you for the first time and they type your name into Google, what representation of you is online? Mm-hmm. And you contrast that to Facebook, where your profile is constructed by you and edited and maintained by you. Your photo, what your interests are, what your status updates are, and if you make a mistake, you can change it. You can delete. And so I think that, at least giving people the power to self-represent, I think is where all of this comes from.
But it's kind of an arms race between data and control, right? Especially if as you say, Connect is becoming more and more what Facebook is, which means more and more data about what the members of Facebook do out on the web is going to be flowing back through Facebook. It means there's going to be probably an exponentially greater amount of data over time about each individual that will be in some degree under your control, right? Or inside Facebook under the user's control, that they have to be making decisions about how to manage, right? So even as you keep, in your view, improving their ability to control it, the quantity of stuff to be controlled is going to continue to grow dramatically.
So I think that that's happening with or without us. I mean, I think, if you look at tracking cookies on advertising networks across the web, some of the work Google is doing and others, I think most people don't actually understand, their activities are in some way being tracked online. And I think, again, this comes from this notion of, rather than have this silent cookie that's persistent on my browser that may or may not track me across websites, let me make an explicit choice. It's like when I go to Yelp and I review a restaurant, I'm totally fine with that being published back to a profile. If I'm, on a shopping site, maybe shopping for an engagement ring, for example, probably don't want that published back.
The famous case of Beacon problem, yes.
So you want to get people the control to make overt choices over those things. And I think that, for me personally, and I think for the company is and for Mark, absolutely, is the sense of just giving people, again, control to self-represent, control to have decisions about what they do with their data online.
Is this the kind of thing you talk about day in and day out when you're, talking to Mark and Chris and these guys? I mean, is this sort of a big issue? Like, how do we manage this? How do we balance these different factors?
I mean, I think it's one of the issues. Like, I think that, a lot of this stuff boils down to, like I said, very difficult product design in terms of how you make these choices. Like, one of the things that kind of unrelated to privacy I wanted to talk about was, you talk about trouble with, people adjusting to changes in the product. And a common question we get, and this isn't interesting for those of you doing product design here, is, well, why don't you just give me an option to turn it off? Like, whatever you did and changed, just, like, give me an option to go back to the old one.
Revert to the old way.
Like, give me an old one. And by itself, that suggestion is actually quite reasonable. But what you do is you plot that decision over 5 or 6 design iterations, and you end up with this product with like 16 different settings. Like, are you on version 6 or version 3, and which way do things get configured? And if you've ever used a product that has a preference panel that's like 13 tabs deep, you know what I'm talking about. Which is like, there's just way too much configuration. And so that is not the way you build a really easy-to-use product. You try and streamline for the common-to-use case. And I used to work on Firefox, and we had a very similar problem, which is every release we would endeavor to remove settings from the preferences panel and to try and make it automatic and adapt. And we'd get people upset every time we did it because there was a segment of users who really wanted that one checkbox on and off. And that really is hard to build a great product if you're kind of building an option for every person in the entire world to do it.
Okay, since you mentioned Firefox, Mitchell Baker said something interesting on stage yesterday on Yossi's panel, which really struck me as relevant. She said that Mozilla wants to become sort of an identity manager for people. It sounded like she seemed to be saying that one of their goals for what they intend to build is something a little bit similar to what Facebook is trying to build, which is a sort of identity and kind of privacy management system for the internet. What did you think she meant by that? Have you had a chance to ask her?
I'm honestly not sure.
Since you used to work with her?
Yeah, Mitchell's a fantastic person, by the way, and I haven't had a chance to catch up with her after that. So
did that surprise you to hear her saying that?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what she meant. So I think that, I think that, at least from my time at Mozilla cares a lot. It's funny because it's a very similar message. It's about innovation and control. Having, a lot of the genesis of Firefox was giving users and web developers choice over their browser so that the web ecosystem could flourish. And so I know a lot of the things that's true to their mission is giving people option and choices in these things and trying to give, again, back to letting people decide for themselves what they want to do.
There's so many things we could discuss, and we do need to get to the panel momentarily, but, I was fascinated yesterday when that artist, Jonathan, whose last name I'm forgetting, made his presentation, which I thought was a very good one. Harris, yeah. Really, I loved him. But the first part, did you see his thing?
I didn't.
Oh, because the first part of it was his software that he's used over the last 5 years, which maps emotions based on his study of the verbiage in blogs, right? And it reminded me a lot of stuff that Facebook has begun doing to sort of mine the status updates to do kind of emotional mapping of the world.
Yeah.
Is that something, going back to this data question, I mean, Facebook does have sort of a uniquely vast data hoard. In fact, I think in the book I use a statistic that somebody came up with that the sum total of status updates alone in Facebook is probably at least 10 times the total words that have ever been written on blogs worldwide. The status updates are such a huge thing being done by 350 million people. So there's a lot of content in there about what people think and feel. Is that a resource that can be mined in a significant way over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're referring to is we've done some kind of fun studies about sentiment analysis and how people are happy or sad and how it correlates with world events. And I think that that's interesting from a sociological and kind of an intellectual perspective, but I think it's not really the primary purpose of Facebook. I think that for a lot of people, Facebook is a very individual experience in terms of them communicating with the circle of people around them. And I think that's a lot more where we focus our time. I mean, the core business, of course, is about providing a great product experience, which also means customizing. If you think about what we show you in the newsfeed, which stories do I highlight to you, which friends do I recommend you connect with, is actually one of the key values of Facebook. And that is based a little bit on the information on how you use the product and the person itself. So I think less in the aggregate data and more about how do we tailor the product for you as an individual to make sure that it's a fantastic experience. But I mean, you're right, it's stunning. There's, I think, something along the order of 3.5 billion pieces of content shared every week now on Facebook.
3.5 billion pieces of content shared
so this is
every
video,
week.
status updates, links, photos.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable.